So I just recently spent almost 5 months backpacking through Africa, traveling from Kenya all the way down to South Africa, a journey of over 5,000 kilometers, and traveling primarily overland with spontaneous detours like to Uganda and Zanzibar. I'm assuming I traveled at least 2 or 3 times that length. There was just so much to see, so much to do, perhaps the most overwhelming continent I've visited in every sense of the word. Despite the chaos and challenges along the way, backpacking through Africa has been one of the most incredible, breathtaking, and just all out memorable trips I've ever taken. I have no idea where to even start recapping this journey, which fittingly is kind of how I approached my trip and cluelessly dove headfirst into the continent. No plans, a very loose itinerary, and pretty much going off of vibes alone. I went wherever the wind took me, and it took me to some unforgettable places indeed. I visited 9 countries in sub-Saharan Africa over the course of those 5 months, mainly the regions of East Africa and Southern Africa. I've also traveled to North Africa, but for this video we're keeping it to sub-Saharan, so places like Abu Simbel in Egypt and Merzouga in Morocco will be saved for another video. There's a lot to unpack and uncover, but for now let me count down my top 10 favorite places that I visited on this bucket list journey. Hopefully it inspires you to check this criminally underrated continent out for yourselves, and in no particular order, here are 10 incredible places to visit in Africa. Let's kick it off with the Masai Mara. This was my first real safari, and my god, if I had the money, I would do this like every week. The Masai Mara is a national park in Kenya known for its vast savanna, large populations of wildlife including the famed Big Five, and the annual Great Migration of millions of animals. This place was just special, from the excitement of seeing wildlife from lions to elephants. The vast plains of tall yellow grass were simply unreal. Cozying up at camp in the evenings with the local Masai people, it was an unforgettable experience. It is so difficult to describe what it was actually like being here. The grasslands just made the world feel limitless. The sky seemed massive. Does that make sense? I don't know, but believe me, it just felt bigger than usual. It is one of the wildest feelings I've experienced to just be out there in the vast savanna. Words could not do it justice. The Masai Mara simply has to be experienced to understand its majesty. Next up, we are heading down to Botswana for the first time. We will be coming back to this incredible country a few times in this video. There are just so many mind-blowing places here. Like our first stop, the vast Magkadigkadi salt flats. Now, I've seen my fair share of salt flats, including the world's most famous, the Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia, but I've never seen salt flats with hyenas and zebras and baobab trees, so that's a point for the Magkadigkadi. It's not a competition though, and for me, salt flats never get old. They are just some of the most surreal landscapes in the world. When you're standing on that vast, flat whiteness, it truly feels like you are on another planet. Especially at sunset, it just adds to the already otherworldly setting. The Magkadigkadi salt flats are massive. They are the largest in the world, covering an area of about 30,000 square kilometers. You can self-drive if you have your own vehicle. There are so many parts of it to explore. I had to tag along on a cheap safari since I didn't have my own car, but it was one of the cheaper activities I did in Africa. It cost me about $35, lasted a little over 2 hours, and had some snacks and drinks at the end. Capping the day off with a game drive through scenery like this and then having some sundowner brews is a wonderful investment in my opinion. So if you find yourself in the tiny village of Nata, Botswana, tag along on a little sunset safari with the Nata Lodge. It is an excellent addition to any Southern African road trip or backpacking adventure. Alright, on to the next one. This might be cheating, but the entire country of Uganda. Unfortunately, it wasn't in my budget to do too many activities here. It wasn't even originally in my itinerary, but I had met so many people in Kenya that hailed from Uganda, and they were all so happy and friendly and warm, and I just had to go and see what was in the water in Uganda and why literally everyone had a constant smile on their face. And despite a rocky start at the border where I found myself out $160, this little detour did not disappoint. The people of Uganda are amazing, some of the most fun I've ever had in a country. Everyone is just hilarious and friendly and warm. It felt like you could become friends with them instantly. And that's not even mentioning the sheer variety of activities to do in Uganda. I will be absolutely going back one day to go trekking in the snowy Rwenzori Mountains, home to some of the tallest peaks in Africa, just behind Mount Kenya and Kilimanjaro. And of course, the gorilla trekking, one of the few countries in the world where you can see gorillas in the wild, Murchison Falls, the Nile River, Lake Victoria. There is a lot to do in Uganda, and I'd say it might be one of the most underrated countries in Africa and one of the biggest surprises of my trip. Another one that surprised me was Zanzibar, which I know is famous and iconic, but I'm not really a beach person. I was born in the Philippines, so I have been spoiled by the best beaches in the world. I do not particularly seek them out when I am traveling, so the fact that I got sucked into Zanzibar and spent 2 weeks there is saying something. The culture and history of Stone Town, the idyllic local village life of Nungwi, the lively backpacker and nightlife scene of Paje Beach, as well as the countless islands and activities that you can do in and around Zanzibar, it packs a punch. It is an essential stop and a welcome respite from the more fast paced and exhausting adventures that backpacking Africa might throw at you. Many of which can also be found in Tanzania, like summiting Mount Kilimanjaro or trekking in the Usambara Mountains, or simply trying to exist in the chaos of Dar es Salaam. Now, I unfortunately couldn't afford to do Kilimanjaro this time around. Don't worry, I did get an equally amazing trek in that we will talk about later, but for now, let's carry on past Kilimanjaro, past the towering baobabs of Tarangire National Park, and the tree climbing lions of Lake Manyara, all of which are worth a visit, as is the Serengeti, of course, but we're not making it all the way there, for we are stopping at the unbelievable Ngorongoro crater. This is perhaps the most unique safari you could go on, and it is tough to compare experiences, but I think the sheer diversity of landscapes plus the concentration of wildlife make the Ngorongoro the best game drive that I've done on the continent. So as we reach the entrance of the park, we are already driving through a misty, magical cloud forest with tons of monkeys. Being up in the canopies of the trees is already a spectacular setting, and then you drive up so high that you are out of the clouds and overlooking the crater, one of the largest volcanic craters in the world, and home to tens of thousands of animals, including the Big Five, of which we saw four. The leopard always seems to elude me, but we did get a very distant glimpse of a rhino and some very close up glimpses of lions, including this pack of lionesses getting comfy on some construction equipment. It's nice that they labeled the animals for us. On top of the wildlife, the landscapes are just breathtaking, such a variety from plains of tall grass, fields of many colored wildflowers, little lakes here and there with families of hippopotami lurking within, and other less treacherous waters inhabited by flamboyances of flamingos. Just tons of animals here. Unfortunately, a lot of them are baboons. They would be my arch nemesis if I had one. But anyway, the crater really helps with the concentration of wildlife. The circling rim just keeps them all in one place. Seriously, wonder why there aren't any giraffes here? It's simply too steep for them to get in or out. So yeah, the animals here, they're not leaving. As one of your best shots to see lots of wildlife in a stunning environment, the Ngorongoro crater is the quintessential safari experience. And that's 5 down, 5 to go. I know I said this top 10 was not in any particular order, but I can't lie, these next 5 destinations are undoubtedly my top favorite things that I've done in Africa. So let's carry on with one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, Mosi-oa-Tunya, the smoke that thunders, Victoria Falls. All the way down on the Zambian and Zimbabwean border we go. But wait, before we go, how are we going to get there? Here is a bonus adventure taking us from Tanzania down to Zambia. Now, I've already done a whole video dedicated to this train journey, but a recap of my favorite adventures in Africa would not be complete without mentioning the epic sleeper train from Dar es Salaam to Zambia. I spent 3 days on this thing before it broke down at the Zambian border. The whole journey honestly felt like a fever dream, locked in my little cabin with my 2 roommates, Tree from China and Zabanike from Mbeya, just watching the world go by. The Tanzanian countryside was beautiful with its rolling green hills, vast farmlands, remote villages, seas of baobab trees, and hidden wildlife lurking in the tall grass. It was simply impossible to get bored of looking out of the train window. However, it was a huge test of patience. There was also no electricity on the train, so trying to battle boredom without resorting to gadgets was honestly quite difficult, but I loved every moment of this absolutely unhinged train journey regardless. It felt like a blast from the past, a gritty and uncomfortable but pure and authentic experience straight from the history books, one to toss on the bucket list of any kindred spirit. On to Mosi-oa-Tunya, that is the local name for Victoria Falls, and it means the smoke that thunders. Which, after experiencing this place firsthand 3 separate times, because I loved it that much to be exact, I'd say Mosi-oa-Tunya is a much more fitting name than being named after an elderly white British lady. So yeah, we're gonna call it Mosi-oa-Tunya. These thundering waterfalls really do not need an introduction. They are, by some measures, the largest waterfalls in the world, with a length of 5,600 feet and a height of 355 feet. Now, they're neither the longest or tallest, but during the rainy season, it is by volume potentially the strongest waterfall in the world, as the entirety of the Zambezi River comes crashing down through the gorge. It is nothing short of awe-inspiring to witness firsthand and to feel yourself drenched by those powerful waters. There are many ways to experience Mosi-oa-Tunya, including getting up close by boat or taking in an aerial view by helicopter. I stuck to land but paid a visit to both the Zambian and Zimbabwean sides, as well as sneaking a peek as I walked across the border. It did not disappoint, but make sure you plan accordingly, as sections of the waterfall do dry up during dry seasons, and other sections might be inaccessible during wet season, such as the famed Devil's Pool, where you can swim right up to the edge of the falls. No matter when you visit, though, it is a sight to behold, truly fitting of the distinction as a natural wonder of the world. On to another natural wonder, back to Botswana we go to visit the Okavango Delta, a place that has fascinated me since I first heard the name. I remember when I tried on one of those VR headsets for the first time, the very first YouTube video I watched was in the Okavango Delta, filmed from a small canoe trying to navigate its way around a massive elephant. Then a few years later, here I was on the same small canoe called a mokoro, getting bluff charged by a large mammal of my own, a hippopotamus. There's nothing quite like a wild animal charging straight at your flimsy boat to make you truly feel alive. Do not let this deter you, though. That is just the reality of exploring some of these untouched destinations, and that's exactly what the Okavango Delta is. It is untamed and pristine, it is so remote, and it was quite the journey to even get to the village of Daunara, where we set sail from. But despite it being so savage, it is simultaneously such a peaceful and tranquil place. The way the Makaro glides through the water almost silently, with nothing but the chirping of the birds disturbing the eerie quietude of the environment. The tiny animals, golden hour, early morning lighting, I felt like I was a princess in a fairy tale movie, like if I was Snow White on Pocahontas' canoe or something. It felt like a dream, but I remember every detail so clearly: the little otters splashing playfully, sending gentle ripples out through the water, the small birds flitting about everywhere, and the group of usually talkative travelers that I had spent the last few days with, all of us completely silent, just soaking it all in. Hopping on a Mokoro and paddling through the Okavango Delta is a core memory, as was the subsequent bushwalk upon docking the Mokoro. While we didn't see much, exploring the Okavango on foot was such a unique way to experience Africa's raw and rugged environments to their fullest. This whole adventure, 10 out of 10. Would do it over and over and over again if I could. We have been spending a lot of time in nature in this video, so let's take a quick city break to the first and only city that managed to make this list, in no small part due to the stunning nature that surrounds it, from the unmistakable silhouette of Table Mountain to the endless ocean lapping on its shores. To the mother city we go. Welcome to Cape Town. I first visited Cape Town nearly 6 years ago, and I could not pull myself away from its clutches. I eventually spent 2 months in this jewel of a city, and as cliche as it sounds, absolutely left a piece of my heart here. Cape Town just might be my favorite city in the entire world. At the very least, it is in the upper echelons with the likes of Mexico City and Istanbul, Seoul and Barcelona. There is just so much to adore about Cape Town. Although I still had a few weeks left to continue exploring Africa, upon arriving to Cape Town once again, I decided I was home. I spent the final 3 weeks of my time on the continent just hanging out with old friends and meeting new ones, revisiting some familiar favorites and falling in love with new haunts. Honestly, after 4 months, I was exhausted, so I do not regret my decision whatsoever. I mean, look at this place. The abundance of incredible hikes, from Kirstenbosch to Table Mountain to Lion's Head and beyond, the stunning scenery from Cape Town's many beaches, countless cute markets, a pulsating nightlife scene, incredible incredible cuisine, both local and international, Cape Town is simply elite in every measure. It was the perfect place to wrap up my trip. I approached it as sort of a victory lap, just treating myself to good food, fun nights out, and the other comforts of city life after months of very much roughing it.
Got all my camping tent, sleeping bag, mat, everything in the desert now. Alright, after way too long, I set up camp.
Namibia was perhaps the deciding factor in how I ended up laying low in Cape Town for so long, so let's backtrack to the straw that broke the camel's back, a big part of why I found myself needing to slow down and opt for something more comfortable was the absolute chaos of trying to navigate Namibia as a solo budget backpacker without a car in a country that lacks any affordable public transportation, as well as other solo travelers to split any costs with. I almost left Namibia as soon as I arrived because of this. It was a journey to get here from Botswana in the first place, involving 7 different modes of transportation and a lot of hitchhiking, only to arrive in Windhoek and realize that all of the worthwhile things to do in Namibia were probably inaccessible to me. This desert country is a challenge. It is very remote, very sparsely populated, and with little infrastructure for travelers that aren't self-sufficient. I was very close to giving up and coming back for Namibia another time, but I had one last push in me and decided I could not leave without visiting Sossusvlei. And while I don't think I've made a better decision on this trip, being so close to my finish line, knowing that I could just hibernate in Cape Town was honestly extremely tempting, but I had dreamed of visiting Sossusvlei for years. All those pictures I saw from my favorite photographers and creators, I just could not believe a place like that was real. But it absolutely is real, and it is so much more incredible than I ever imagined. Upon reaching the top of Big Daddy Dune, yes, Big Daddy is its actual name, I decided to remove the word otherworldly out of my vocabulary unless it made me feel the way looking down on the Namib Desert felt, followed by removing the word surreal upon reaching the camel thorn trees on the Deadvlei salt pans. I don't think words have been invented yet that can capture the feeling of being at Sossusvlei, but I've always wanted to use this word, so I'm going to say it. Sossusvlei was phantasmagorical. Looking out at the dried up clay and salt pans, gusts of wind pelting you with sand as a harsh sun just beats down on you. Meanwhile, the oryx and other wildlife just trot along in this inhospitable environment. It is, honestly, like I said, phantasmagorical. And while Deadvlei is the most recognizable part of this desert, there is so much to see. I mean, you have to drive like 60 kilometers from Sesriem just to get to Deadvlei and Sossusvlei, so you are passing dozens of towering sand dunes and Martian landscapes. Every minute of the journey is photo-worthy. Sossusvlei is breathtaking. And honestly, I don't know how I'm going to follow up Sossusvlei in this video, but we are going to give it a shot because last, but definitely not least, is Mount Kenya. The second tallest mountain in Africa gets relatively little love compared to the iconic Kilimanjaro, and that was very evident as I sat at the summit gazing out in every direction, unable to spot another human being for miles and miles. Compared to Kilimanjaro, which sees thousands of climbers every month, Mount Kenya was a true escape into nature. Kilimanjaro was out of budget, and initially I thought of Mount Kenya as kind of a consolation trek. It was a quarter of the price, it was not as well known, and only the second tallest mountain in Africa. I thought I was settling for something worse, but the more I learned about Mount Kenya and the more I heard from travelers who have hiked Kilimanjaro, it grew from a what if to a hyperfixation by the time I was about to leave Kenya. I knew I could not leave the country without at least giving it a go. So, out of shape, underprepared, and overly optimistic as usual, I set off with another solo traveler from my hostel, met up with our guide Captain John and our porters David, Francis, and Joseph. Along with me, Elijah, we made up for a very biblical band of backpackers. The trek up to the summit of Mount Kenya will honestly blow you away. I did not expect nearly the variety of landscapes and scenery and wildlife that we encountered on this hike. Every few hours, it felt like I was in an entirely different country altogether. One minute you'd be hiking through tall yellow grass and bush typical of the African savanna. The next you have found yourself hiking along a turquoise lake as if you were in the most remote regions of Patagonia. Dramatic landscapes akin to what I'd expect from Iceland and rolling green countryside akin to Scotland. I'd be sweating as we walked through arid terrain with these funky trees, and then a few hours later, I'd be making snow angels on a glacier en route to the summit, which is perhaps my proudest accomplishment of my entire time in Africa. It was a challenge, it was very tough. I was just starting my trip and I was very out of shape, and this was my first hike in 4 or 5 months. So despite being an avid hiker, I was well out of practice. I was slow to reach the summit, but step by step and with the help of David carrying my backpack for a little bit, I made it. There were some unforgettable places that I encountered on this journey, but I've got to say, sitting here at the summit, watching the sun rise over the endless African wilderness and countryside will stay with me forever. Asante sana, thank you guys for watching. There is a lot more to come from my adventures in Africa and beyond, so why not stick around? Don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment if you want to know more about any of these places, and subscribe so you can stay tuned for my journey across the world, 80 countries and counting, and you are all welcome to tag along. Kwaheri, see you guys next time.